Thunderbolts, believe it or not, is the 36th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this time with a focus on the rejects of the MCU. The characters that are often forgotten about and that aren't usually the first people you would go to if the world was about to end. I'm not going to beat around the bush on this one. I absolutely adored Thunderbolts for a number of different reasons. But I don't think I'm alone in saying that either, because at this current point in time, Thunderbolts is the best reviewed Marvel film of the last couple of years, and rightfully so, because it is that good. Now, I think part of the reason this film is clicking with so many people is the fact that this film genuinely feels like a breath of fresh air in the MCU. And I don't just mean that in the sense that, oh, it's a good Marvel film for once. I mean it in a literal sense in terms of its visuals and its tone. Some of Marvel's recent output, specifically Quantumania and Brave New World, kind of fall into that territory of being so overworked visually that it can look too polished and too cleaned, and it kind of lacks that human element. Thunderbolts thankfully rights that wrong and feels like it's made by actual people. I think part of that is down to the fact that there is a really nice solid blend of a lot of practical effects and the usual visual effects that you see in these sorts of films. But I think also because this film has a very distinct, grounded and gritty look to it, but also feels a bit rough around the edges as well. And you can tell that that's very deliberate. The tone of this movie is a lot darker than other MCU projects we've had throughout the years, and that is 100% reflected in the cinematography, which is genuinely gorgeous in this movie, but also, again, in that rough around the edges feel that the film is going for. It reflects the characters in the film, it reflects the themes that this film is going for, and I think if it looked a bit too over cleaned and polished, I think it would have lost that element. So the fact that this film is very grounded, very gritty, and isn't afraid to be a bit messy in places perfectly fits everything this film is going for. And I think it's an element of MCU films that has been lacking in recent entries that we haven't really seen properly utilised since Infinity War and Endgame, and that is a sense of realness and feeling lived in and something tactile to kind of ground these movies. We got that in Infinity War and Endgame. We got a little bit of that in Guardians Volume 3 and a little bit in Deadpool and Wolverine. But for the most part, a film has not really delved headfirst into that since Infinity War and Endgame. And I think Thunderbolts is the best example of that. It takes those elements, ramps them up to 11, and really commits to that tone and that visual style through the entirety of the film. Whilst we're talking about the tone of the movie, I really appreciated the fact that this film was not afraid to go to really dark places with its themes and its emotional core of the film. A lot of the emotion and drama from this film comes from Florence Pugh as Yelena, and specifically her relationship with her dad, played by David Harbour, who plays Red Guardian, and also the new character that she comes into contact with, played by Lewis Pullman, called Bob. The way the film constantly reinforces Yelena as the emotional anchor of the entire movie is really well done, whether it's scenes with her and Red Guardian, or her and Bob, or even her with other members of the team. It's just really well done. And even the battles that she has to go through herself to overcome those dark thoughts that she's having, again, are really well realised, both from an acting perspective, because everyone in this film is giving great performances, but also, again, from a visual standpoint, because it's something that MCU films haven't really delved into, at least not for a while, is the emotional trauma of characters that we've come to know and love throughout the years. It's just something that we kind of take for granted now, because a lot of Marvel films usually are just so focused on, like, these are your characters, this is their dynamic, and they need to stop this thing from happening, and then it's just kind of straight on to the next thing. Some Marvel films do often tend to forget to spend time with their characters and really flesh them out and discover what makes them tick as characters. And again, this is coming from someone who loves the MCU and loves Marvel. I'm not bashing that, I'm just saying that it's something that Marvel films forget to do every once in a while. And for a film like Thunderbolts to just entirely be focused around that, I really loved. And the fact that it goes to some dark places, and the fact that it starts to peel back the layers of the various members of this team really just works. For example, one of the characters in this film is John Walker, who was a character I was not a massive fan of from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I thought he was very arrogant, very rude, and I just didn't like the general vibe of his character. And again, he brings that same energy to this film. At the start, it can be a little bit grating because, again, he was a character I wasn't a massive fan of from that show, and it just felt like more of the same. But as the film starts to delve into these characters' backstories and really start to peel away the emotional layers in terms of their trauma and what they've been hiding for all this time, honestly makes them more likable and adds these extra layers of depth that we've never had the chance to experience, especially for these characters who are often forgotten, or often the villain, or often the rejects of other Marvel movies. For example, the stuff we get to see of John Walker really humanises him as a character and makes him more vulnerable, which is something that we've not really had the chance to do, especially because of the events of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, making him out to be the bad guy of the situation. This is now a nice change of pace to see the man behind the shield and why he operates the way he does. Again, similarly to Ghost, who was a really intriguing villain from Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I felt was a little bit underutilized in terms of what they could do. And again, in this film, they get that moment to shine and they feel like they're actually there for a purpose. And it's also just nice to see more of them. On top of that, you've got some great new additions to the lineup, such as Lewis Pullman as Bob. I thought he was fantastic in the movie, especially during the second half of the film, where a lot of the heavier aspects of the movie really ride on his performance and the emotional weight that his character is going through. And he pulls everything off perfectly. There's elements of humour, there's elements of darkness, there's elements of vulnerability on a mass scale, and he does a brilliant job of, again, grounding and humanising those elements to the point where they're not over the top. The action set pieces in this film I also thought were really, really well done. Whether it's the small hand-to-hand combat scenes that felt very gritty and rough around the edges, like I've said earlier, but also the bigger set pieces, which I thought were just brilliant. One in particular, which I absolutely adored, was when Bucky finally comes into the fray and starts getting involved with the events of the film. All it is Bucky riding a motorbike down a highway, taking out these trucks one by one with explosives, whilst he catches up to the team. That's all it is. It's something we've seen in action films quite a lot. Someone with sunglasses riding a motorcycle down the road while cars explode. We've seen that before. But the way it's executed in this film is one of the most badass things I've seen in a film for quite some time. And it's been quite a while since I've said that, and I meant it genuinely. But it is. It's probably the most badass action sequence we've had, especially in a Marvel film, since possibly the corridor fight at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's on that level. It's, again, very simple, very straightforward, but the way it's executed in this film just itched a part of my brain I didn't know needed itching. This feels like the first Marvel film since Guardians Volume 3 that really has a heavy emphasis more on its story and its characters more than anything else. Yes, there is a plot and there are things that need to happen for other things to set into place, But that's not the focus. The focus is the characters at the centre of this story, and the story that brings these characters together and makes them work as a unit by the end. It's refreshing, it's what Marvel needs right now, and I loved every second of it. The direction is solid, the cast are all brilliant, the cinematography is genuinely stunning, some of the action set pieces on display here as well are also fantastic, and also the score. Oh my god, how have I not mentioned the score yet? The score by Son Lux is, again, refreshingly creative for a film like this. They introduce a lot of sounds and ideas that we haven't really heard in Marvel films before, and it feels refreshing to hear throughout the film. It can get quite dark, it can get quite creative and unique, and it's just, again, quite refreshing to hear, and I really loved what they did, and it reinforces a lot of those emotional beats that the film is going for. I honestly loved everything that Thunderbolts had to offer, and I really wish that more Marvel projects would be willing to go to that darker side of the MCU that we don't get to see that often. Even in the more light-hearted Marvel films, we do see some of that darkness, but it's usually just there for a little bit, or is usually just reserved for the villain of the film. Thunderbolts is the first film in quite a while that just kind of delves headfirst into that dark aspect of these characters and of this universe as a whole, and just kind of revels in playing around with that, both from a visual standpoint and from a story perspective. Hopefully we will get that a bit more with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret War, because that was something that worked for Infinity War and Endgame, is the fact that they felt a bit darker and a little bit more mature in tone. We got that with Thunderbolts. We probably won't get that with Fantastic Four, because that's going for a different tone. But, and again, it's something that Marvel doesn't have to do with every project. It's just nice to see from time to time. And I think it's something that the MCU could really do with more of. So guys, those are my thoughts on Thunderbolts. Please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.